Hey art nerds! So we've talked on the channel a lot over the years about very affordable, accessible watercolors. I have reviewed about 100 different student grade watercolors and shared them with you guys, as well as a variety of professional grade watercolors. We have talked about everything from Cotman to Reeves to Crayola, and in the past, we've even talked about Yarka and Prang. Today, I wanted to revisit Prang, and not that I didn't like it the first time, because I actually did. So this can't quite be Art Supply Redemption because I already liked it, but I wanted to put it through some paces, and I also wanted to compare two different Prang sets. The oval watercolors that you guys might be more familiar with, and then the half pan watercolors that I saw on Amazon. So today we're going to be comparing both sets. We're going to be doing a bunch of swatches, both on cotton rag paper to give them the best chance possible, as well as on cellulose paper. We are also going to be comparative swatching Prang against Crayola, as well against professional grade watercolors like Da Vinci. Actually, it's Da Vinci. It's literally Da Vinci. And the rationale for that is to give you guys a basis of comparison to help you decide what kind of watercolor might be the best fit for your needs. We are also going to paint, yes, I painted this with Prang watercolors. We're going to be painting a field test together today. So I have a lot to share with you guys. So let's go ahead and dive right into Prang watercolors. Hey there, art nerds. So I have been working through my backlog, and a few times over the years I have mentioned Prang watercolors as being a good, affordable, and accessible option for people who are interested in getting into watercolor but don't necessarily want to invest a whole lot of money, or they're not necessarily sure that they're going to enjoy watercolor. Now, it has been a few years since I have tested Prang watercolors, and I decided that today was going to be the day that we sit down and we revisit Prang watercolors. And I have two sets for us. I have the half pan set of semi-moist watercolors, and I also have the intense colors semi-moist watercolors. So are Prang watercolors just for kids, or can anybody enjoy fun watercolor techniques with Prang watercolors? Let's find out together. So Prang watercolors are manufactured and released by Dixon, which is the same company that makes the Ticonderoga. Wow. All right, let's try that again. Ticonderoga. Gosh, I have a math teacher mother. I should be able to say that. Those are considered like the Cadillac of school pencils. Anyway, they're made and manufactured by Dixon. Dixon is their parent company. If you are more familiar with Crayola watercolors, I've talked about those here on the channel as well. I may also compare them to the Crayola educational watercolors, because I think of the inexpensive, fairly accessible watercolors, the Crayola educational watercolors are actually pretty good. I don't know. I kind of want to play it by ear. I definitely do want to test out some like watercolor techniques that I use all the time. I would like to field test these watercolors to see, you know, just how usable they are. But I don't necessarily want to go into this with a strong game plan, because things may change. So I want to be kind of open to a lot of things, but I definitely want to do unboxing. I want to do swatching. I want to swatch these on a cotton rag paper, and I also want to swatch them on Canson XL watercolor paper. So we have our two palettes. This is the half pan palette. They do come with a brush. I probably will be discarding the brush. This is the oval palette. Okay. These washable, less expensive watercolors, they tend to use a lot of glycerin in the watercolor formulation to make them washable. They tend to use dyes rather than necessarily pigments to make them less toxic and to make them more affordable. So we have, interesting, these actually move. We'll explore that in a minute. We have a synthetic brush, and over here we have another synthetic brush that actually had some sizing and it had a cap on it. Both of these are size 6s, even though they look pretty dang different. I believe both of these palettes feature refills. So if you're a teacher and you're using these, you can actually buy the refills and just pop them back into place. The build quality on these is actually pretty sturdy. The colors look similar but not the same, which will actually make these interesting to swatch because it'll be fun to see the differences. The half pan one, these slide a little. You can push them closer if that's better for you, or you can push them a little bit further apart. I don't know that they make additional colors that we could like add a third line in. And other than the type, these slide a lot more actually. Other than the like size, right? Like these are ovals versus pans or rectangles. It seems like the palettes themselves are pretty much the same with different inserts. So I think that's kind of interesting. It's the same amount of colors. I don't really feel like one looks more or less professional than the other. I guess given the exterior, if I saw these in a store, I would assume this one is the more mature version and this is for younger artists, but really I don't think there's anything really to that other than darker colors, and you can actually see the colors in the palette versus brighter colors, and you can't really see, well, you can see the little representative swatches there, but there isn't really anything one way or the other that like says this is for adults, this is for kids. And I don't even think that's what Prang is intending with these. So I want to swatch these on cotton rag paper. I am using my standard Blick Premier cotton rag paper. It is a block bound paper that is Dick Blick's store brand. And I'm going to start with the half pans. I mean, I guess they're like kind of technically half pans. They're not. Let me show you guys half pans. Give me a sec. Okay, this is my daily driver palette of, you know, filled from tube half pans. So these are magneted in, but they're just little plastic pans, generally of a uniform size, that can be kind of slotted into a variety of palettes. The reason I say half pans with air quotes for these is they're just a little bit different. You know, they've got like a lip to them. They are shallower than a standard half pan. They might also be a little bit larger. Now you could certainly fill these with tube watercolors if you want to. There is no reason why, if you want to use this as a palette, you cannot. In fact, go for it, right? I think that's fantastic. My first palette was like a cotton larger palette, and I just refilled it with Winsor & Newton colors when I was ready to upgrade. So, you know, I am all for recycling and reusing the things that you have to get the most use out of them. So if you like this format, there is no reason why you cannot refill it. But these are not necessarily standard half pans, hence the air quotes. Now, if you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I am a watercolor artist, comic artist, and art educator. I have been reviewing watercolors for about 15 years now, so a really long time. And I paint the watercolor comic 7-inch Kara, which you can read at 7inchkara.com. I have painted thousands of watercolor illustrations, and I bring that experience to my reviews that I share with you guys. I enjoy reviewing a variety of watercolor supplies in a variety of price points and aimed at a variety of ages, which is why you are seeing me review the Prang watercolors today. What I am looking for are quality watercolors that are accessible to people and affordable to people. So even if these are meant for children and formulated for children, I am hoping to see easy activation, bright colors, clean color mixing, decent wet into wet, decent layering, and I'm hoping to test all of those things out today. Today, I am hoping to figure out how these two sets differ. I am looking for pigment information or manufacturing information so we can better understand these watercolors. I'm curious about what binder they're using. I want to talk about how accessible these sets are to the general public. I would like to compare these against the Crayola Educational, and I'd also like to compare these against professional watercolors to help you guys decide if this is a good place for you to start or if you want something a little bit different. I want you to try out wet into wet, layering, and color mixing in today's review. And I am hoping to have the energy to do a field test with at least one of these palettes, depending on how they perform. Because really, I want these to succeed. I've had good experiences with Prang watercolors in the past. A lot of you guys like Prang watercolors, and I'm really hoping that I can continue to recommend these as a very economical way to get into watercolor. So I really want these to succeed, but I want to set my bias aside and make sure that the advice that I'm giving people is good advice and still holds true. The colors are bright, fun, and saturated. Colors activate immediately with no pre-activation. There's no real granulation to these, but I love the color palette. Already, I think this set could be so fun for floral painters who paint for reproduction, or like daily watercolor journaling. These are cute, accessible, easy, and fun. So already I'm pretty impressed with the Prang half pans. The colors are fun, they are bright, they are vibrant. There's a couple that I'm like not super excited about, like this brown is and that white is also but of the 16 colors, that's just 2. And this is a very inexpensive and extremely accessible set. So that's already like better than some of the student grade watercolors I've reviewed that are twice the price. So I'm really excited about today's review. I'm excited about the tests for today. I'm hoping that this is a knockout of the park, right? We deserve an easy win right now, right? So I'm hoping that that's what we've got on our hands today. So now I'm going to switch this one out for the oval pans. I do wish the oval pans stayed in place a little bit better. The half pans have just a tighter fit, so they're a little bit less likely to shift. But I'm hoping similar things, slightly different colors with the oval pans. The colors are somewhat different, not just in the color itself, but how they're formulated. The colors in the oval set seem less intense, although the half pan set dried a bit dull. Neither set has any interesting granulation, and the colors flood the wash area, but that's not really a surprise given the type of watercolors that these are. Interestingly, I think the oval pans are fairly different from the half pans. There are some colors in common, like some of these blues definitely seem very similar. There's also some colors that are just drastically different, like some of the yellows and some of the greens. It seems like not only are the colors kind of different, but the way some of these watercolors are actually formulated, the dyes that they're choosing, or maybe even the dye to binder ratio. The colors in the oval set in general seem less intense, although the half pan set dried a bit dull. It'll be interesting to compare them once they've dried. Neither set has any interesting granulation, and colors do uniformly flood the wash area, but again, this isn't really a surprise. I'm assuming for the most part these are inexpensive dye-based watercolors. So here is Prang on Amazon. You guys can see they have a few different options. Like they have the oval set but with different branding. This is more similar to the half pan set. You also have like the little 8 sets here. But what I think is interesting is the half pan refillable set. So this is $11.26 on Amazon. It's not exactly the same packaging as what I have, but it's pretty similar. And the color selection looks pretty much the same. You also have the really inexpensive not refillable sets like this, which is $8.03. And I know some of you guys are probably thinking, well, compared to Crayola, this is just so much more expensive. Crayola in general is not refillable. I think you can buy some refillable Crayola now, and we're going to explore this a little bit later on. Not all Crayola is made equally. The Crayola Educational is actually much better while still being fairly affordable, and it's at about the same price as the Prang watercolors. And also, like, this is Amazon. You can find better prices in bulk. You may find a better price at an educational store or at Walmart or at your local art supply store. So I'm just trying to see if we can find any information here about what these are made with. It says that a special feature is that it's non-toxic. Now they do say pure pigments with no wax fillers, provide smooth laydown and vivid colors, white mixing tray and brush included, sturdy box with easy to open lid, and refillable half pan, save you time and money, includes 16 brilliant items or 16 brilliant colors. But I'm not really seeing anything about pigment information, and a lot of companies will use the word pigment very loosely. Now this is definitely more younger artists facing. They refer to it as student artists. But again, there are a lot of older artists who enjoy using Prang watercolors because they are accessible and they are affordable. So that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at it today. And you also have some reviews down here. So you can see you could paint some really beautiful art with these watercolors. I'm on Blick now and I'm seeing the little oval pans, but so far I'm not seeing the Prang half pans. And I really didn't expect the formulation to be too different. I honestly kind of thought it would be the same thing in a slightly different package. I do think it's a little strange though that I'm not seeing the Prang half pans. So here they are at Michael's. Online only, it claims. I'm not sure this is an American release because ours typically does not have all the labeling information there. It's out of stock anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And you can see Michael's wants it for the princely sum of 20 bucks. And Walmart doesn't have the 16 color set, but they do have the 8 color set for $7.97. So, oh wait, I lied to you. They do have the, I don't know why when I looked up, whatever, it's fine. Yeah, so even on Amazon, it's about $11.86. Now, I will go ahead and say I am not recommending that you get it from Amazon or from Walmart or from Michael's. And not just because of the price, I just, am not recommending you get it from them. I would recommend you get it from your local art education supply store if you happen to have one, or your local brick and mortar art supply shop. Help keep small businesses in business. They may be able to offer you a better price. And if you're a teacher watching this and for whatever reason you are buying a class set of these, they may be able to give you a bulk discount that you might not otherwise have access to. Now, since these sets seem pretty similar, for the sake of my sanity, I am going to pick up the oval set, at least until we swatch over on the Blick cotton rack. And we're instead mostly going to focus on, oh, we've already got some cracking going on here. That's just cosmetic. It's not a real problem. We're going to focus on the half pan set. Just because, you know, I like the colors a little bit better in this set. There's a lot of color similarities, but in general, I like this set more. This would be the one that I would bring to full field test. So while we have 16 bright and fabulous colors, I do want to do some color mixing because color mixing is just really important to watercolor. So we're going to do two types today. We are going to do atomic and we are going to do optical. Optical is, well, I'll just show you with a demonstration. So optical involves us taking some color, ideally our primaries, and we're going to do a line going in one direction. Have to get all the paint out of my brush first. It doesn't, once it's in there, it does not want to leave, even though I have a paint puck in there. And that yellow really got in there. I am scrubbing. Still have some of that old blue in there too. That's going to be a problem. Okay, so if you're painting with these, you may want to avoid your softer brushes because once it gets in the bristles, it's hard to get it out. All right, so now we're going to let that dry and we are going to focus instead on atomic mixing, which is basically where we take two colors, smash them together to make a secondary color. I am easily able to mix good secondary colors, at least when we're working in near mass tone. So I am going to do the wet into wet test next. It'll be really interesting to see how these disperse when you give them a lot of water and how they kind of interact wet into wet. Colors mix and disperse pretty similar to a lot of dye-based watercolors I've reviewed in the Student Grade Showdown. This is why I'm so hard on some of these brands. You can get the same quality, the same effects with Prang watercolors for way less. The colors are very intense while they're wet, and then they just kind of dry gray. The rest of optical blending is pretty simple. We're just going to go back with the same colors that we used before and glaze them on top of our original layers. And we're looking to see if it creates secondary colors with the subsequent glazes and layering. So we're going to start with yellow, and you should in general be able to still see some of the color underneath. The end result of the optical mixing is pretty mediocre. All right, so we did a few different variations on color mixing. We have here our atomic, where we've taken two colors and smashed them together. I also did some test skin tones just to see how that might turn out. I did my optical, where I take one layer of color and then glaze another layer of color on top of it. That I felt like these watercolors don't do so well with. And we also did a wet into wet test, and I feel like most of the colors kind of fell apart when you add that much water. So I feel like the best use case scenario for Prang watercolors is very immediate watercolor, where you're either using it directly from the pan or mixing it and then applying it and then layering. So I don't feel it's necessarily good for like pouring and wet into wet techniques. I don't think you're really going to get what you might be hoping for out of this, but I am sure we will put that to further test later on. So now I want to swatch Prang watercolors on a cellulose paper, our Canson XL watercolor paper. So I'm going to start with the half pans again and then move on to the ovals. The colors go down so saturated and bright, but they lose a lot of that saturation as they dry. It would have been easy to pass these off as great watercolors if you were just looking at the photos while they were wet. I'm kind of thinking about popping a couple of the ovals out and putting them in with the half pans. You're not going to get a clear wash with these, but because they flood the area. On cellulose paper, these watercolors seem to take a really long time to dry. So I am going to go ahead and move these aside. One of the things I'm kind of noticing, and I don't know if it's because once these get some water on them, they can get very soupy. There's some colors up in the half pan section that are not more intense, but they're more splotchy. And then down here with the ovals, they're a little bit more uniform. And I don't really think it's like a formulation thing in this regard. I think it's probably because I was using the half pans more with the color mixing tests and that sort of thing, so they had more water on them. But I think it's still something kind of worth noticing. Also, I don't really necessarily understand the color discrepancies between the two. I'm glad they're not the same palette, because that would be very boring for me as a reviewer. But I don't really understand why, for example, in the oval palette, we have an interesting magenta and a really pretty blue violet. And while these two blue greens are very similar, at least they're showing up. And then we have kind of a nice sap green. Whereas in the half pan palette, which in general I would argue is a stronger palette, we have like, and it even wants to granulate out into two different dyes, and a color that's kind of like an indigo, but not really like an indigo. It can't decide if it wants to be a blue violet or if it wants to be an indigo. At least with the cooler green, or the cooler blue, I'm sorry, and the green, there's more difference between the two, but like, it is such a weak, cool green. And the same for the sap green. And you're probably like, well, Becca, like, these are Prang. These are for kids. And okay, fair enough. I just can't like not review watercolors when I'm reviewing watercolors. You know what I'm saying? So I just can't take the reviewer hat off. And I mean, that's why you're watching anyway. You want to know if these will be a good fit for what you want to do with them. But I do want to compare them against other inexpensive children's grade watercolors, as well as against a professional grade water, to give you guys more information about, whether or not these are a good fit for you, or if you should upgrade to something a little bit nicer. So let's create a little context. These swatches, I did these like yesterday. They were done with a very inexpensive 36 color palette that looks like this from Five Below, with the chalky chiclet style watercolors. So this is about a $5 palette, and this is about the quality of color you could expect from that $5 palette. So even the oval prangs are already leagues ahead of that. These are Crayola Education mixing colors. So this would actually be their mixing color set. So a cool red, a warm red, a warm yellow, a cool yellow, a cool blue, a warm blue, and then I forgot what this color is. It might be a black. So it's not quite the same as their normal palettes. I've tried their washable watercolors. I hate their washable watercolors. These are a little bit better. They do have another education set, which is like the primary colors that you might expect. I don't know where that palette went. This is several years old, and I haven't used it in a long time. You can see that the pans are replaceable. You can buy refills. And very similar to the Prang set, there is a tray that can just pop out, and you could replace the whole tray if you wanted to, or you could just not have the packaging. So one of the things I do want to do, and these are different colors, but I do want to swatch these against the Prang half pans so that we can talk about Crayola watercolors a little bit. Now, where I live, which is Southeast Louisiana, at the time of recording, you can't really go to Walmart and find the Crayola Education watercolors. You do have to look a little bit harder for these. We used to have an educator supply store called The Educator, and they did carry these. My brick and mortar art supply store might carry these in the children's section as well, but I know they carry the Prang, and they carry a lot of Faber-Castell for kids. And if you're interested in children's watercolors in general, I have reviewed a lot of Faber-Castell stuff over the years. So these are not as easy to find as the washable watercolors, despite being way better, and the washable watercolors being kind of frustrating for anybody over the age of 5 to use. And I will caveat, I know there are people who use the washable watercolors and they can paint wonderful things with them. And I have literally no idea how they are able to do that other than years of learning those watercolors and making them work for them, and not necessarily having the ability to buy more expensive watercolors. So they've had to figure things out and make do. And I have the utmost respect for them to be able to do that. But in general, I would not recommend the Crayola washable watercolors, and I find them really just an unpleasant experience all around. But I do want to, as I said, comparison swatch the Crayola watercolors against the Prang half pans for y'all. So for today's comparison, we have the Prang half pan watercolors. We have the Crayola education watercolors, and this is the mixing colors set. And then we have Vinci watercolors. And I happen to really like Vinci watercolors. They are also US made. This is a professional grade set. And as you guys can see, it has gotten a lot of love, and I have refilled some of these colors several times. So this is also a mixing color set, and I think it'll be really interesting to show you guys how these 3 watercolors differ. I'm going to start by re-swatching Prang for comparison's sake. My notes are pretty much the same. So we start with a masstone swatch, and then we do a washout swatch just to see if anything changes, if there's anything interesting, or if we get any interesting granulation. So one of the things I noticed with kid grade watercolors is that they really seem to struggle with colors like ultramarine blue, and I'm not really sure why. I'm not expecting granulation from them, just a good warm blue that can mix decent purples. The ultramarine blue in the Crayola set is just weird. Still, I think the Crayola educational set is far better than your usual Crayola washable watercolors, although I would not be tempted to paint a field test with these at this point, if you get what I'm saying. I will with the Prang, but not with these. So next is Vinci. I had to move the swatches down so that there'd be enough room for y'all to see the washes and granulation. Colors perform more uniformly. There are no dead or wasted colors. I did spritz these with water to get them to wake up and activate faster. The neutrals, the browns, yellow ochre, have more depth and can achieve greater saturation. If you'd like to see a demonstration of this mixing set, I have videos where I use this palette to paint various things, so please check the description for additional links. The Vinci mixing set is one of my favorite watercolor sets. These are made in the US. These last a really long time. I think they're quite high quality, and I think they're rather affordable given how long they last and how well they perform. So I really do recommend them. Doing comparison swatches like this actually brings up an interesting point. How do these children's educational watercolors compare against professional watercolors? Professional watercolors typically have gum arabic, honey, or proprietary base like Aquazol. They may contain dyes as lake pigments, but they also contain synthetically derived and mineral pigments. They may have properties like granulation, which you guys can see here with the ultramarine blue, that is just lacking from the Crayola ultramarine blue. Generally, professional watercolors are more saturated in masstone and will not flood a wash as much as the children's grade watercolors will. And what I mean by flood a wash is we added water about halfway through and it pulled the color all the way down. You cannot see any gradation with these. Basically, maybe where the water line is, you can kind of see a shift in color, but not really. Generally, and it's not really apparent because of where I did the opacity line with the Da Vinci, you can see a difference in the color versus where you added the water. It should gradually get lighter and gradually get more pastel. So that's what I mean by flood a wash. Professional grade watercolors are not specifically formulated to be washable the way children's watercolors are, and many colors are incredibly staining and will stain skin and clothing. Now, none of these shown here are that staining. Thalos are very, very staining. I have a couple of Thalos in the Grumbacher watercolors I'm currently reviewing, and I finally got the blue off my skin, but I had blue on my nail and skin, and it was pretty obvious. Some pigments in professional grade watercolors are toxic, like cadmium and cobalt. Many professional grade watercolors are formulated to be lightfast, meaning that it can withstand sunlight without fading, although this is not true for all colors. If you're just doing watercolor for fun, you may not feel the need to spend a lot of money on professional watercolors, and that's fine. Professional watercolors can be very expensive, and if you're just doing this as a hobby for your own enjoyment, there is no reason to feel like you have to spend $100+ for something you may not get that much use out of. Children's grade and student grade are just often not as capable for the same effects and techniques that you can achieve with a good professional grade, but you may not need those techniques for your art or for what you want to practice. Some might find that these watercolors work well for practicing hand lettering in watercolor or watercolor florals, and that's fine. That said, I would strongly recommend not using children's grade watercolors for art that you intend to sell. If you're selling reproductions like prints, that's not an issue. Or if you are scanning your work and then sharing it as a webcomic, that's also fine. But selling originals made with these paints is not a good idea because they will fade. The pigments the paints may fall off the paper over time. Just in general, they're not designed to last a super long time. Now, part of me does not want to do a field test because I know these will probably fall apart if I try to paint something somewhat ambitious. But I do feel like, just to be fair to you guys, I should do a field test to show you guys why you might want to consider investing in nicer watercolors, or to show you why these might be a great place for you to start. Because I will admit, the Prang watercolors are very accessible. They're very affordable. Walmart might have them, not mine, maybe yours. Walmart Online has them, Amazon has them. Your local art store probably has them for a fairly inexpensive price. Michael's has them. All kinds of people carry Prang watercolors. They're not hard to get, and they cost less than $20. The colors are bright, they mix decently well, and they could be a great place to get started on your watercolor journey. This illustration was inked on Arches cold press watercolor paper. I have the line art available for my patrons. If they'd like to color along, you can find it at patreon.com/natosoup. And I'm doing a lot of the same pour and punch techniques that I've used in some of my other floral bouquets. If you're interested in learning how to utilize this technique, I have tutorials here on the channel where I demonstrate this technique and explain it in depth as well. In fact, if you are looking for watercolor tutorials in general, this channel has a huge backlog of drawing and comics and zines and watercolor and marker tutorials that I sincerely hope you guys will check out. So it's probably the smartest to keep paintings made with Prang very pastel and light. These colors don't have a lot of impact and they would probably turn ugly fast. It feels a little like a waste because I like this illustration, but we'll always have the line art. So I had some trepidation when I was starting this illustration. I've done pour over for all of the bouquets so far, so I'm going to do a pour here as well, and we'll see how it works. I'm actually fairly satisfied with how it worked. So far, colors layer decently and make good secondary colors with a little color melting. In mass, like the last pours, they do get kind of chalky and opaque, so definitely not the best option for more saturated watercolor. So these definitely dry kind of opaque and chalky, and they don't really carry a lot of saturation. They're way more saturated when they're wet than when they're dry. So these are the kind that are a little tricksy, if you know what I mean. These also reactivate very easily, just a couple spritzes of water and they move around a lot, even if they fully dried on a cotton rag paper. So yes, you can paint with Prang watercolors, but I do want to offer several caveats. Painting with Prang is good for mixed age groups where you're trying to meet a variety of needs, like younger children and adults. They're going to be easier to clean up and more affordable than student grade or professional grade watercolors and can do many of the same techniques. I also think these can be great for practicing brushstrokes for journaling or as an entry point to see if you even enjoy watercolor as a medium. They are going to be able to do several techniques that student grade and professional grade watercolors also are able to do. Very similarly, although not one-to-one, and they are far cheaper. So if you are afraid of wasting your money, these could be a great way to figure out if you even like the medium. My issues are that these colors mix kind of weak and muddy, they dry kind of muddy, and they're going to obscure line art and they don't glaze particularly well. And I don't see that improving if you're using them on a cellulose paper. So we gave them the best chance possible by using them on a cotton rag paper here. All in all, Prang performed better than I expected, and it's nice to be able to test out and recommend a very affordable, very accessible watercolor option for play and experimentation. Also, I wanted to try lifting these out on the blackberries for highlights. They definitely lift, which can be good for adding highlights and dewdrops. So honestly, painting a field test with Prang kind of impressed me. I didn't have the highest expectations, and these kind of outperformed those expectations and let me do a lot of techniques that I would do with higher grade watercolors. I did have to re-ink this. I did have to do some adjustments, but I really wasn't expecting the Prang to handle so well. So Tish, color me impressed. I don't talk about this too often, but videos like this take several weeks to record. And the ones where I am decanting tube watercolors into half pans take even longer. The swatching takes a couple of days, and then the field test I have to draw the field test, and then I have to pencil and ink the field test, and I have to stretch the watercolor paper, and then it may take a few days to paint the illustration. So if you enjoy tutorials like this, if you find them helpful, please do consider that something as time-consuming as this is a resource. And please consider supporting the work that I do and sharing it with other people who might find it helpful. Even if you kind of click this video being like, oh, Prang watercolors, really? And rolled your eyes, but then you watched because you were curious. Other people are just getting started with watercolor. They're on a very tight budget, or they're just curious too. So help this channel grow and help make videos like this possible and worth my time by sharing it with other people. Whether you share it somewhere for a laugh, like, hey y'all, you were complaining about watercolor being expensive. Look what you can do with Prang. Or if you're sharing it to seriously help someone else get started on their watercolor journey, it really helps me grow the channel. It helps kind of offset the costs that I incur recording these kind of tutorials, and just quite frankly, I make art to communicate with other people and to help other people. And if people are not enjoying my videos, if they don't find them beneficial, or they're not finding them at all, I lose a lot of my incentive for even making these in the first place. So if you like what I do and you want me to continue to do it, please consider sharing it with other people. Now, I did re-ink this piece just to kind of clean it up a bit, add some of that contrast back, and clean up some of the muddiness. But I consider that a small price to pay, and I usually have to re-ink my field tests anyway because a lot of watercolors carry some opacity to them. Now, please keep in mind, I am not saying that Prang watercolors are as good as professional grade paints. I am not saying that they are lightfast like professional grade paints. I am just saying they are an exceptional option for children's grade watercolor that have easy cleanup and should carry no toxicity. And that really impressed me. I was impressed that we were able to do so many different techniques with these watercolors without some of the major problems that I've seen with, say, Crayola watercolors in the past. So if you're looking for a budget, eco-friendly, and children-friendly watercolor option, Prang watercolors can really punch well above their weight, and I was really impressed. The price point is also quite attractive too, making this an easy entry point into watercolor. spent a lot of time with Prang today. Not only did we comparison swatch two different Prang palettes, the half pan and then the more traditional oval palettes. We did some color mixing. We did some wet into wet tests. We also swatched them against Crayola as well as against professional grade watercolors to give you guys kind of an idea of the differences between them. We swatched them on a cellulose paper and we painted a blackberry, evening primrose, and aster bouquet. So I feel like I've got some things to say. They're mostly good. These are not a replacement for professional grade watercolors, but they are a very good, inexpensive, accessible option that's within the reach of most people, whether you are a child or an adult who are interested in watercolor. And as somebody who wants to help other people make art a habit, to make it part of your daily life, to make it accessible regardless of your income level, I love that. It's hard for me to list out the pros and cons because I feel like my cons are based on judging them against professional grade watercolors that are sold at far higher price points. So I'm going to mostly focus on the pros, and that's what I want you guys to take away from this, while still highlighting some issues that you might want to be aware of. The pros. These are refillable. You can either refill the empty pans with higher quality tube watercolors, or you can buy refills. You can also slot in regular half pans there as well. So this set could grow with you. It is very inexpensive. These are sold at a variety of stores, so not just art supply stores, although I don't see Prang so much where I live, like at Walmart and stuff. So you may have to go to like a Michael's, or you may have to go to an art education store. You can definitely find them at walmart.com and Amazon though. These handle extremely well for children's grade watercolors. They're non-toxic, they're fairly washable, they're great for kid artists and beginner adult artists, and they're accessible and affordable for classroom use. So what about the cons? These dry very and let me caveat, the cons are mostly based off of me reviewing professional grade watercolors. So kind of take this with a grain of salt. These dry very cloudy and opaque. They're probably glycerin based, which is going to change the kind of techniques that you can get away with them. The field test, and thus many of my notes about these watercolors, was done on a cotton rag paper. So I threw expensive paper at this to give it the best chance of performance. I realize that is not going to be everybody's option or everybody's choice. I did test on a cellulose paper, but I didn't actually paint anything on a cellulose paper. So if you guys are interested in seeing me use these in a Canson XL watercolor sketchbook, let me know down in the comments below. We'll see how that will differ. These are probably not archival or lightfast, so they would be best for experimentation and scanning for reproduction or for sketching. These do have limited color strength. They don't really have a lot of saturation to them. They also have limited color mixability, particularly in a practical setting. They also have a limited color selection, and they don't handle layering particularly well. Like I said, these are all like, the cons are all based against higher grade watercolors. So I do think it's a little unfair for me to bring them up, but I did want those of you who are looking for like a professional grade dupe, basically, to be aware that these are not that, but they are still very good. So what is my verdict on Prang watercolors? These are a great option if you'd like to play around with watercolor with a budget in mind. If you'd like to start practicing brushstrokes and certain techniques, if you want to teach watercolor to children, or if you're a very infrequent watercolor user who still likes to pull it out occasionally. These are a great option to begin with, and while they do have their flaws, they're certainly easier to paint with than Crayola's watercolors, at least in my experience, and are far cheaper than most decent student grade brands and perform better than the really inexpensive ones. And I should know, I did an entire student grade showdown where I reviewed very, very, very budget student grade paints. So please rely on my experience here and believe me when I say that these handle a lot better than the inexpensive ones. These watercolors punch well above their weight. Before we say goodbye, I pulled out the other floral bouquet field tests that I have done. I have 7 of these. I didn't realize I had done so many. They've been a lot of fun though. And so one of the things I want to point out is, in my opinion, they all look pretty good. And that's kind of the goal with a field test, is even if a product gives me a lot of problems, I still want to make a piece of art or illustration that I am happy with afterwards, regardless of how the paint's handled. So don't let how the finished product looks sway you or make you doubt what I'm going to say. So, as you guys know, this is the Prang Bouquet. I think it holds up pretty well next to these others. Now, no time has passed since I painted this. I don't know if it's gonna fade. I'm gonna go scan that as soon as I finish recording this because I like it and I want to still have this as an art asset that I could turn into cards or something, right? So I don't want to give it a chance to kind of get ruined. But this is the Prang. This was painted with Grumbacher watercolors. This was painted with the Paul Rubens floral palette. This was painted with SA watercolors, and I really did not like how this handled. It was very, very chalky, and I had a lot of trouble with color mixing, so I ended up re-inking this. I did a lot of work on this to kind of fix this up. This was painted with tonic watercolors. These were painted with Lightwish Medici watercolors, which is also, I believe, another children's level watercolor, but it's a Chinese children's level watercolor, and it's being kind of marketed as like kind of sort of competition for Gensai Tanbi, but not really. And then this was painted with Case for Making watercolors, which was another watercolor that I really struggled with and wasn't super happy with. But I kind of wanted to show, like, I'm a little bit surprised at how well the Prang watercolors hold up next to like professional and handmade brands. Now, will they hold up over time? I wouldn't bet on it, but I also used a bunch of Opera Rose in the Paul Rubens one, so that one might not hold up either, just due to the fugitivity of that color. But I thought it was worth showing you guys, maybe giving you guys some context that while not perfect and they are not professional grade, they're not meant to be, they actually handle surprisingly well. Now, some aspects you might like granulation or color layering or building up color depth, not as accessible with these. But I had fun painting this. It only took me like an evening and then a little bit of the next day. This one was a really quick one for me, and I'm happy to be able to share it with you guys. So if you guys are curious about the bouquets you guys see here, these are included in their reviews. So again, Grumbacher, Paul Rubens floral, SA watercolors. This one is already out. You can watch this. Tonic watercolors. This one is out. You can watch this. Case for Making watercolors. This one is out. You can watch this. Medici watercolors. This one is out and you can watch this. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys these before we said goodbye. I want to be very honest with you guys. For the kind of watercolor that I like to do, like I'm actually preparing for an art show. I do like to sell my originals. I like granulation. Prang watercolors are not going to suit most of my needs, but I think they are a phenomenal budget option that is accessible to a wide array of artists, whether you are buying supplies for a child artist that you enjoy painting with, or an aspiring artist, or you're on an extreme budget, or you like watercolor some and you want some watercolor effects, but you don't want to invest a whole lot of money into watercolor because you are a digital artist and you just want to make watercolor assets, or you are a marker artist and you just want to use like a little bit of watercolor here and there, or you only like to pull out watercolor like once a year, like whatever your reason. I think Prang, while it has some limitations and it is not a professional grade watercolor, it's not trying to be a professional grade watercolor. In fact, if I had to rank it, I would be like, my best budget option would be Prang. Then for like medium, you want good watercolors, but you don't have a lot of money to spend, I would say Malayang pigments. And then for something a little higher end, gee, I always seem to find myself using Winsor & Newton. They're a good workhorse brand, or Vinci or Core. So that kind of gives you like the 3 tiers, yikes, the 3 tiers as they are in my mind. Since I'm up, I might as well show you guys. Yeah, that was painted with Prang. Prang and some patience, and it's not perfect, but I'm impressed at what Prang was able to do. So if you guys would like a tutorial on how I painted this bouquet using Prang watercolors, let me know down in the comments. If you're one of my amazing patrons on Patreon, obviously your words hold more weight with me. Y'all help pay the bills and help me buy the supplies that I review here on the channel. So if patrons want a tutorial of this, they will definitely get a tutorial of this, whether other people want one or not. I'm really glad that I took the time to kind of revisit this. I really love being able to look at very inexpensive, very accessible watercolors, and I am particularly happy when they are actually all right and I can recommend them to people. I love having affordable entry point options to get people into watercolor because I really love watercolor and I want it to be more accessible to more people. I think it is a wonderful medium that once you learn how to use it, even when you're buying the expensive paints, can be a very economical way of creating traditional media art. I'm a huge fan of watercolor, if you guys can't tell. And if you have not taken a moment to check out my art, I feel like I've probably shared some of it during the video, and we certainly painted together. It would mean the world to me if you would read my comic, 7-Inch Kara. You can read it as a web comic at 7inchkara.com. You can also purchase copies from my website at nattasoup.com/shop, or you can fill out a library request form and ask your local library to get copies. And that's possibly one of my favorite ways for people to read my work, because not only do you get to enjoy 7-Inch Kara, but now other people get to enjoy 7-Inch Kara as well. And I love that. It is a watercolor webcomic or a watercolor comic, depending on where you read it, that follows the adventures of a tiny Lilliputian girl named Kara who sets out on a big adventure. She learns how to ride cats and she makes some unusual friends along the way. And you can find it at 7inchkara.com. I also make a lot of illustration, if you guys can't tell, and I regularly share on social media, pretty much everywhere. So Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and I actually have not been updating Tumblr. I don't know why, I just haven't been updating Tumblr. And of course, I share art here on YouTube on my community tab as well as in my shorts. So it would also be really helpful to me if you would make sure, if you enjoy this video of course, that you subscribe and you click the bell notification so that you don't miss updates from me, whether it is art or a brand new video. Also, if you want to support what I do and you want exclusive access to the materials that I create for the classes that I teach in person, in fact, I am getting ready to go teach a Paint a Snowball class right now, and my patrons already have that class. You can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/nattosoup. For just $2 a month, you not only help support me buying the materials that I use to review the things that I review, you get patron exclusive tutorials. You also get patron exclusive access to the materials and tutorials that I create for my in-person classes. And my patrons already have the printable coloring sheet for this bouquet. So if they want to paint along, if they want to marker along, if they want to do a graphite transfer with it, they already have the line art for this over on Patreon. And you can get it too by joining me today at patreon.com/nattosoup. I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative for you guys. I really enjoyed being able to put this together, and I hope to see you guys again soon. My goal for my channel is to help you guys make art a habit, to help y'all make art a part of your daily lives. And one of the main ways I know how to do that, other than sharing art tutorials, and I have so many art tutorials, is by sharing reviews to help you guys decide how to spend your money and how to get the most joy from the art supplies that you have. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye guys!